and to be a military outpost for whatever nation owned that valley. And as a result, it passed into a lot of hands. The first mention we have of the city of Megiddo was by the Egyptians. Tutmosis III in 1468 BC did a military foray here into Palestine and conquered Palestine for the Egyptian Empire. And he was the stepfather, Tutmosis III, of our friend Moses. You remember Moses got pulled out of the bulrushes and by the daughter of Pharaoh. Remember? Okay. The daughter of Pharaoh, her father was Tutmosis III. And he was a mighty conquering Pharaoh, built the largest empire Egypt had ever had. And he led a military expedition here into Palestine. And it's recorded in Egyptian that he fought here at Megiddo and conquered this area. And it was very likely, friends, that 1468 is only 23 years, before the Exodus. It's very possible that many of those soldiers that fought here, Moses knew them. Were you with me? Moses probably wasn't here. He was in exile for 40 years. So during that period, he wasn't here, but he probably knew many of the soldiers who were here. So that's the first mention we have of Megiddo. Megiddo is then mentioned again in the Bible, in the book of Joshua, that Joshua conquered Megiddo. It's mentioned again when Solomon is king as one of the chariot cities of King Solomon, meaning that he had stationed a significant portion of his cavalry here and his chariots here. And when you climb up, the guides will show you up there the stables that we found where the horses were kept and the troughs that we found where the horses were fed. The more they dig out of the ground, the more the Bible proves to be true. Right. Yes, that's correct. Say that with me. The more they dig out of the ground, the more the Bible proves to be right. And that's exactly what you would expect to find here, if the Bible's right, is evidence of horses and chariots, which is exactly what we found. Megiddo also is important because the last good king of the southern kingdom. How many good kings did the southern kingdom have?
2.
8. We're talking about guys like Jehoshaphat. We're talking about guys like Asa. We're talking about guys like Hezekiah. And the last of those 8 good kings, whose name was Josiah, was killed here in 609 BC. That's only about 20 years before the southern kingdom fell. God had told him not to fight here. He tried to stop the Egyptian army from going north to fight the Babylonians. And God said, don't go do it. Stay out of it, And Josiah didn't listen. And he led the Israeli troops out, the Hebrew troops out, to try to interfere with the Egyptians, who weren't going to mess with the Israelis. They were just marching through. And he got hit by an arrow, and he died here at Megiddo, 609 BC. Okay. I guess that's enough history. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Enough. Okay. Megiddo, as I said, forms a strategic military outpost to defend the Valley of Armageddon. That's why nation after nation after nation conquered it and made a city here, because from this city they could control the valley. And the valley is extremely important in that it was a thoroughfare for people going from Europe to Africa. The Egyptians came right up through this valley, coming north. And it was a thoroughfare from Asia to Africa and to Europe. So, this was a heavily traveled region, and therefore having a military outpost here was a great thing to have. Now, this behind me is the tell of Megiddo, I hope you know what a tell is. A tell is a mound where one civilization's built on top of another, built on top of another. When you find a strategic spot like this, then after one city is destroyed in battle, the next group of people to own this area just build a city on top of it. They don't clean everything out, they just build on top of it, and the next one's built on top of that, and the next one's, and so forth, and eventually it forms like a little mound like this called a tell. And there's been great excavation done here. In fact, the first significant excavation in the Holy Land is here. Started all the way at the beginning of the 1900s. And what they do is they dig down layer by layer by layer by layer. And in each layer, they study what that particular layer represented in terms of the settlement of this place. Okay, now, the Valley of Armageddon, which is directly behind where we're sitting, also plays a part in Bible events. Yes?
Yes.
Revelation chapter 16 says that the final battle of this age, before the return of the Lord Jesus Christ, occurs in the Valley of Armageddon, right behind us here. And it's at that valley that the forces of Jesus, the forces of the risen Christ, defeat the forces of the Antichrist in a massive battle here. And then Jesus takes the devil and he puts him in prison for 1,000 years, and he begins his millennial kingdom. What does millennial mean? 1,000, yeah. He begins his 1,000-year reign here on earth. And that battle is going to occur in this valley. In fact, the word Armageddon is not really a word. The Hebrew is Har, which means mountain. Megiddo. Har Megiddo is what the valley is actually called. But when the Greek New Testament, when it was written, the Greeks changed it just a little bit to Armageddon. Now, there's a difference between translating a word and transliterating a word. Y'all interested in any of this?
Yes.
Okay. When you translate a word, you take its meaning in one language and you put its meaning in your language. And we understand that, right?
Right.
Okay. So mayim in Hebrew means water in English. That's a translation. When you come to a word in a certain language that either you don't have a word for in your language, or it's convenient not to use it, then you transliterate it. Meaning you just take the sounds and move the sounds into your language. You don't actually translate it. So for example, the word in Hebrew for banana is banana. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding you. Okay? They didn't translate the word banana into Hebrew. They just took the sounds, banana, and transliterated it into their language, and it's called a banana. You understand? Well, Armageddon, Har Megiddo, the mountain of Megiddo, Armageddon is a transliteration. They just took the sounds, Har Megiddo, and the Greeks just transliterated it and used Armageddon. So people ask, what does Armageddon mean? Doesn't mean anything. It's just the sounds of the Hebrew Har Megiddo, the mountain of Megiddo. You understand? You with me? Okay. So in this valley is where that great battle is going to occur. Now, people want to know all these details about the return of Christ, and that's wonderful. The fact is, the Bible doesn't tell us all that much. And what it tells us is not easily integrated into a very simple chronology. So this leaves a lot of room for people, well-meaning Christian, godly people, to disagree about how this is all going to shake down. Is Jesus coming back before the tribulation period, in the middle of the tribulation period, or at the end of the tribulation period, to get the church and rapture us out of the world? Remember, the